everybody. It's great to be here, or good morning, I should say. It's good to be with everybody. We're here to talk about Severe Weather Awareness Month, which starts March the 1st, and how to be prepared, which is obviously really important, and you really know that when it comes, when bad weather comes. We're also going to talk about first responders, really highly trained and very special people who show up no matter what. When nature puts us on a show that endangers or takes our lives, I think increasingly we know that Mother Nature is in charge, always has been. And we have only to remember the violent, long-tracked tornado that devastated western Kentucky to be reminded of the cost of severe weather and of the people who show up in person to help, many of you all in this room. So it's a real honor to be in the same room with so many of Louisville's professional first responders who went to western Kentucky in the hours and the days and the weeks after the devastation to help and really, I think, show the rest of the country what great public servants do when other people need. They just go and they see what can we do to help. They don't ask any other questions, and it's something I think that's uniquely American and uniquely Kentuckian and to our city as well. So thank you all. We'll be talking more about that here in a few minutes. Now, though the historic tornado of last December is an extreme example of it, Kentuckians obviously are no strangers to severe weather. We can remember entire years or decades because of weather events. For instance, in 1974, a super outbreak of tornadoes unleashed storms across 13 states and brought an F4 tornado to Louisville, killing 3 and injuring hundreds in Jefferson County. I can remember that still like yesterday. I was 16 years old at the time. We also know as our city before the flood, the Great Flood, and after the flood of 1937, the worst Ohio River flood in history, killing almost 200 people and inundating more than 60% of Louisville, all the way up to Broadway. And my parents grew up in West Louisville in the West End, and they still talk about that to this day. Our severe weather also includes flooding, high winds, hail damage, and lightning, and we need to do what we can ahead of time to keep ourselves and our families as safe as possible in the event of any of these weather occurrences. Now, beyond the individual events, I'd like to mention that our city is doing its part when it comes to mitigating human-induced climate change. Clearly, we're seeing more climate chaos than we have in any of our lifetimes. And that's a culprit in intensifying storms that so many areas of the world are experiencing. We have a goal of 100% clean energy for metro operations by 2035 and 100% clean energy community-wide by 2040 to reduce gas house emissions, which clearly helps the climate. So to talk about what each of us can do and have ready for our own families in case of severe weather, I'd like to welcome Mike Kochesik. He is the warning coordination meteorologist for the National Weather Service here in Louisville. Mike, thank you all for being with us.
Thank you, Mayor Fisher, Director Myman, partners, and friends. Thank you so much for your recognition today for the contributions the talented women and men have made from the National Weather Service during the horrific tornado outbreak of December 10th into the morning of December 11th. Meteorologist in charge, John Gordon, sends his regrets that he couldn't be here today. So they sent the next tallest person with size 13 shoes, and I'm standing here in his place. But in all seriousness, though, we are honored and humbled to be here today as your public servants before, during, and after big events like these. Leading up to this event, forecasters and support staff were very busy, providing high-impact decision support services, many updates, accurate, well-collaborated forecasts, briefings, conference calls, many which you may be a part of, and ensuring our critical systems were up to date through that severe weather. During the event, numerous staff members, some that are here today, were present providing weather surveillance and the most up-to-date information in our forecasts. Tom Ray was an excellent forecaster that provided a lot of that updated situational guidance as the storms were unfolding and the situation was changing. Dan McKimming was our lead radar operator that night, providing timely, life-saving information, working long hours under lots of stressful conditions. Brian Newdorf is not here yet. He's on his way, but he had lots of experience with social media in the chat rooms and making sure that the most up-to-date information was passed along to folks like you during that event. These individuals here today were among those working and watching in real time when Bowling Green was struck, watching on the webcams in horror with power flashes in that darkness under those tornado warnings. The mood was somber that night, knowing what was occurring on their shift. Work continued, though, immediately after that event on Saturday and for days and weeks following that event to survey the destruction that was left behind. C.J. Paget was also here. He worked long hours to ensure that shifts were covered and that people were freed up to go survey a lot of that storm damage. C.J. supported by providing direction and map creation of the damaged location so that others could go and survey that damage, compiling reports and keeping many up to date on the latest information on social media. Many other staff members not present here today spent long hours surveying those damages, rearranging personal schedules in order to make sure that Kentucky's hour of need was met before, during, and after this event. Some staff members are joining us virtually here today, including Samantha Miklowitz, and she was truly a team effort along with the folks here to make sure that the National Weather Service staff and partners here in the room provided life-saving information to those affected by the storms. But we can't do it alone, and our partnerships for you all in the room, including the media, is greatly appreciated. Emergency management worked hard and tirelessly and continues to do so to prepare our communities and those that were hardest hit by these storms. We see you as the Weather Service, and we recognize all your efforts to help us do the job of keeping our communities safe. Many stories that we heard on surveys were absolutely heartbreaking, of lost loved ones and shattered lives. There are also amazing stories of preparedness and response to these powerful storms, stories of neighbors helping neighbors, and strangers driving from miles, counties, even other states to provide help and assistance to others here in this state. Kentuckians are resilient, and they are tough. And our agency goal is to increase weather resiliency in our communities across central Kentucky, south central Indiana, and beyond. The most successful stories included those who had multiple ways of receiving warning information through NOAA weather radio, wireless emergency alerts, and communication systems like Code Red. Here's an example of a NOAA weather radio that you can get in a store, any electronics department. This one happens to be a Midland, but any brand will do. And it is something that's very important as a multiple ways to receive a warning in case your cell phone loses power, and this could save your life. Just a simple investment of $30 to $40. Some prepared emergency kits ahead of time, which is also good, with several days' supply of food, water, batteries, medications, and pet supplies. Having an emergency plan before the disaster strikes is paramount to preparedness when it does happen in your community. We are rapidly approaching severe weather season, the traditional severe weather season for Kentucky. In March 1st through 7th is Severe Weather Awareness Week, with March 2nd being the tornado drill across the state, which will happen at 10:07 Eastern Time. Now is the time to review your emergency plans with family and friends to know what you will do when damaging weather hits your community. Unfortunately, it's probably only a matter of time before it happens to us, and it's our turn to experience that impactful weather. For more information on tips for emergency plans, you can go to weather.gov/safety or ready.gov, and there's lots of great tips there to help you and your family and friends create your own emergency plan for your own designs. Again, we are truly honored and humbled as your public servants to be recognized here today and continue to be your public servants 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the most up-to-date weather information. You can interact with us on social media at NWS Louisville, and we'd be happy to share any helpful tips there and talk to you on social media platforms there as well. Thank you again. We are here for you, and appreciate the opportunity to be recognized. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. You guys did an incredible job every second of that whole horrible time, but we appreciated all that great information you gave us then and each and every day. So, and everybody remember, if you ever want to know more about severe weather, you can go to ready.gov and you'll see what's going on there. You'll find in one place all sorts of useful information about any type of severe weather. Now, we've had 6 federally declared disasters in Jefferson County since I became mayor in 2011, and all but COVID-19 have been weather-related. In addition to that, members of our emergency services teams have deployed 3 times out of state to provide water rescue resources for hurricane victims or as participants in an incident management team. And our teams, and all of you guys know, you stay ready for whatever comes because you know the meaning of, well, you never know, and if it can happen, it will happen, and it does happen. And that's why we have invested in emergency services over the past several years and will continue to do so. A multi-million-dollar radio communications upgrade that made our radios 100% interoperable among agencies, which obviously means everybody in public safety agencies can communicate with each other. We've invested in outdoor warning sirens, upgrades, and infrastructure upgrades of all of our technology in our emergency operations centers, and an improved computer-aided dispatch system, which should go live at the end of the year and will allow the dispatch for all safety agencies in an aligned manner. And then equipment, of course, is really important, but the people who use it and are trained to use it are even more important. What I've found in working with our first responders is they've got this kind of blend of humility and confidence at the same time. They don't like to brag about themselves, but they know they're going to take care of business when it's time to take care of business. So today, we're going to celebrate these humble individuals and their heroic efforts, your all's heroic efforts in Western Kentucky, and the heroic efforts that you put in place anytime they're absolutely needed. So let's go back a little bit to just this past December, and it was then in the middle of the night and long before the sun came up, but after they knew Louisville would be spared by the storms, that 4 of our first responders hit the road from Louisville to Western Kentucky in the wee hours of the morning. And they were the first in the region to show up several hours later. When you talk to them, they say it was an honor for the state to ask them to go to the devastated area to help, but while most people were sleeping, they were heading west. Before I get further into the story, I want to give a shout out to Mike Dossett. Mike has done an incredible job over decades. He's the director of the Kentucky Division of Emergency Management, and he's going to be retiring, or he was going to retire at the end of the year, 12/31/21. He announced that before the December tornado. But he said, I can't go out in the middle of this right after the tornado took place. So he stayed on to see things through, which is what you'd expect from Mike if you know him after 44 years in public service. So he retires today. So I think just well done to Mike Dossett. He's been an incredible asset to the Commonwealth for many, many decades, and he's been a great partner to our city as well. So Mike Dossett, thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause for Mike Dossett there. I'm going to ask Jody Myman, our city's emergency services director, to the podium in a moment, but I want you to know that he was one of the first responders in a vehicle on the road in the middle of the night, heading into a natural disaster of now what we know was unimaginable proportions. He was driving with Doug Rechtenwald, chief of Pleasure Ridge Park Fire Department. Another vehicle from Louisville was traveling with them, carried Jody's brother Jason Myman, deputy chief of PRP, and Terrence Delaney, operations chief of our Louisville Fire Department. Our much-beloved MEOC, Mobile Emergency Operations Center, would arrive later in the day and would be the main command post for the Mayfield Candle Factory rescue and recovery effort. Once our 4 intrepid warriors got closer, they could see the path of the tornado, and they drove the back roads when they reached the point where major roads had been closed and that's when they really began seeing the complete destruction that took place in western Kentucky. And clearly, you all know these guys. They've trained their whole lives for unimaginable scenarios. You got to be ready, and obviously that's when the training has really got to kick in. And so when their problem-solving skills go to work is when they immediately showed up and saw what was going on. In this case, they assessed, they processed, they drew upon all the training and scaled up for the scope of what was going to be right in front of them, and it was quite something. They also continue to say that they were proud to work with local and federal officials in these amazing efforts to serve the community, and it was something to watch and certainly to be part of how all of that came together in this immense time of need. Our first responders, the first from outside the region to respond to this disaster, found the local emergency operations center and asked how they could help. Our folks were sent to the candle factory, which for most folks, as they were watching this unfold around the world, was ground zero for this tremendous disaster and tragedy that took place there. Those images were haunting. When you saw the rubble of the collapsed structure full of people, you just wondered how anybody could have survived that. So our team ran rescue operations and later recovery, and then other responders here from Louisville were sent to maintain coverage of local firehouses and other assets as well. So I'd like to ask Jody Myman to come up and talk more about our teams, how they work together on rescue and recovery efforts. I want to thank Jody for always being ready 24/7, regardless of what it is, to help the city get through times of trouble. We're very proud to have him on our team and have him as our leader. So please welcome Jody Myman.
Thank you, Mayor, and I just realized how much older you are than me because I was born in '74, so. So good afternoon, everybody. The Office of Emergency Management is continuously monitoring the possibility of severe weather with our great partners in the National Weather Service. The week leading up to December 10th and 11th was no different. Our emergency management personnel were on calls all week, learning up-to-date forecasts and how they could impact our region. Also, our process is to update all the county stakeholders and partners so that they can prepare for the incoming weather. Backing up a little bit, this community's first responders have been training for situations like this for many years. In 2004, the City of Louisville and Jefferson County received almost $9 million from the Urban Area Security Initiative Grant Program, or UASI. That money was dedicated for first responders to respond to both natural and man-made incidents involving collapsed buildings similar to what was seen in western Kentucky tornadoes. Hours of training and instruction from some of the most talented and experienced responders from across America, as well as millions of dollars in equipment, were dedicated to prepare the city and county's responders for what they may someday face. Many people in this room attended those trainings. At around 1 a.m. on December 11th, Director Mike Dossett from Kentucky Emergency Management, who I would also like to wish the best in his retirement, called to see if we could put together a go team and go to assist Mayfield because of the devastation he was hearing about in the State Emergency Operations Center. I immediately began to have conversations with Deputy Mayor Ellen Hessen, Chief Doug Rechtenwalds from Pleasure Ridge Park, and Lieutenant Colonel Rick Atkinson with Louisville Fire, and it was determined we could rapidly begin the planning process for an immediate deployment, but we must wait to make sure that the storm passed our area and verification that we were not needed locally. When the storm passed, 4 of us got on the road along with members of Louisville Fire, Louisville EMS and Metro Safe, St. Matthews Fire Department, and Anchorage Middletown Fire Department, who were directly behind us as they put their personnel and resources together. Our ideal was to put structural collapse assets together and in the area, along with communications and fire and EMS resources that could assist throughout the city where resources were already busy. We made contact with local emergency management personnel to let them know we were on our way. Along the trip as well, we also requested that the Lexington Fire Department be activated to assist us. The Lexington Fire Department and the City of Louisville resources have trained for many years together for situations like this. When we arrived, we met with local officials and were assigned to assist at the candle factory as well as backfill some fire stations and EMS stations throughout the city. One thing I do want to mention, when we arrived at the scene, it was totally obvious that local responders who were there before us were true lifesavers. The things that they had to face when they arrived and the challenges that they dealt with were something that many, if not all, had never experienced. There were also many lives saved that night, and my hat's off to Assistant Chief Darren French, who ran that operation, and the rest of the Mayfield Fire Department, and everyone who operated at that site. I also want to thank these responders you see here today for their passion and dedication towards assisting another community in need. I also want to thank their families for their responders and their continuous support and allowing these individuals to spend days and weeks away from them, especially during the holiday season. And also give a huge shout out and thanks to everyone back here in Louisville who is supporting us in our operation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jody. I want to thank, too, all the citizens of Jefferson County who donated money, toys, water. People were just very, very generous during this entire time and helped out an awful lot. So in the end, more than 100 of Jefferson County first responders showed up in Mayfield and Western Kentucky, and our police department went to Bowling Green to assist them as well. So of our first responders, they represented Louisville Metro Emergency Services, Louisville Metro Police Department, Louisville Fire Department, Anchorage Middletown Fire and EMS, Buchel Fire and EMS, Fern Creek Fire and EMS, Highview Fire District, Jeffersontown Fire and Rescue, Okolona Fire Department, Pleasure Ridge Park Fire and EMS, and St. Matthews Fire Department. So we wanted to use today, as you know, National Weather Emergency Month, to bring everybody together. We've been just trying to say, how can we honor and recognize all of y'all for the incredible work that you did during those weeks and those months. And a lot of us say, well, we don't need to be recognized. You do need to be recognized. I mean, this is something that when you sign up to do what y'all are doing, you train for it. You hope it never happens, but when it does happen, you all are ready to really get after it and take care of business and save as many lives as you possibly can. And you did it in an exemplary way. You made all of your agencies very proud. You made the citizens of Louisville very proud. I think you made the entire country proud as well. So we wanted to ask everybody to come together and just say thank you and recognize you for what you did. And I guarantee you, you inspired other people that are not wearing the uniforms that you have on right now to follow in your footsteps so that they can help whatever the next disasters are that come down the road as well. But it's truly professionalism in action when I see our first responders doing what they do here in our city, whether it's water rescue or fire or any type of disaster response. You all are a very impressive group of people, and I just want to thank you on behalf of all the citizens of Louisville for a great, great job. So with that, we'd like to present each agency with a proclamation, and I'll read that now. So each agency will receive a proclamation with the City of Louisville honoring you for their quick and professional response to the devastating tornado damage to people and property and loss of life in Western Kentucky in December. Without hesitation, these first responders stepped up to help fellow Kentuckians in crisis, displaying commendable bravery and commitment to service. They collaborated with local and federal agencies to rescue survivors and to restore order to lives turned upside down during this historic weather event. So our city expresses its gratitude to each first responder of Louisville Metro Emergency Services, in this case, for their compassionate service and for always answering the call. So each one of those is customized for you all, and I think we're going to do some pictures associated with that. But first, we're going to take any questions from the media. I'll start with one thing and ask Jody. One thing that emergency operations is never shy about is asking for more assets to respond to crises, particularly another MEOC, Mobile Emergency Operations Center. So that and a couple other requests came out of this because redundancy is important in issues like this as well. I mean, imagine the worst case scenario that if something happened there, then something took place back here, you know, how do we respond as a city? So, no, Jody will fill in the blanks on that.
I'll just let the record show that I was asking for that before the tornadoes happened in Mayfield. No, you know, you always take every situation, especially ones that you can attend, and take a look and reevaluate your own process. I don't know that the biggest city in America could have been prepared for what went through Western Kentucky and you know, specifically Mayfield. You know, driving through the city, the pictures don't do it, and you saw it, you know, firsthand. The pictures don't do it justice. You know, it was a very horrible situation, but, you know, it really, you know, gets us started to think about what we can do to perfect our plan and move forward, and we're working on that now.
Let's ask Chief Rechtenwald from PRP also to share a few thoughts with us.
I think one of the biggest things that came out of it for me is command and control, and seeing that we do need redundancy and training for our people, so that if part of our staff is not available or taken out by the storm, that somebody else can roll in there and do that. They had, to their credit, Mayfield had retired folks on the scene coming back to help them because they were so overwhelmed. So I think in that case, we're very prepared with the amount of training that we've received.